started. I'm going to go ahead and just mute everybody.
Okay. It's nice seeing everybody again.
Yeah, and you, Mike. We are this started. Okay, everyone see my screen okay?
We can see it, yeah.
Super. So as usual, team, welcome to June, London Excel Meetup June. As usual, we've got Paul Martin here to present, and I'll leave him to introduce himself and introduce the session rather than me taking up the time doing it. But welcome everybody. We are live on YouTube while this is going as well, so all this session is also recorded. And on that note, just to mention a few upcoming events, and then I'll hand over to Paul and we'll get the session going. As you can see on screen, all of the currently scheduled events are in-person ones. So I don't know that put you off, being this is an online event. For those outside the UK or outside London, there will be more online events. It's been a little bit off the radar at the moment, and I need to put some focus on that because of things we've been booking, like venues, for example. You can see a couple of question marks there. Venue, literally 95% sorted, but not enough for me to write it on a public forum. But the speakers and the topics are all booked in for anybody interested who happens to be.
Sorry, Alan. Sorry, I don't think that we are seeing or people are not seeing your screen share. I've just stopped Paul's screen share. If you can try once again, just to make sure that everybody can. Mike, let us know if you can currently see it. Okay, perfect.
That's good.
That should be fine. Yeah.
That's it. But yeah. Sorry. So yeah, as you can see on the screen, so we've got 3 events booked in. Remember, your in-person ones are not recorded; they're not streamed or anything. It is in-person only. There will be online stuff coming. Don't let that put you off. Sign up to the group if you're not, and you will be notified when they come out. For those of you who are in London or want to travel to London, next 3 events are pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. We have Rishi Sapra presenting in a few weeks' time, 28th of June. Microsoft MVP for Data Platform, speaks at all the major Power Platform events worldwide, pretty much. So having him in London, he lives in London, is pretty handy for us on a selfish point. And then we've got Danielle Stein-Fairhurst, who many of you may know from the financial modelling world, world renowned there. Over from Australia, she's in London for a month. She's going to come and speak. So that's pretty awesome. Great chance to catch up with her for anyone interested. And then John Peltier over from the States. He's over in the UK for a short spot, and he's going to come and present in August. So pretty awesome. We've got some kind of rock star speakers, to be honest. There, people who speak, get paid to speak all over the world, and they're going to come and speak to little old us. So any excuse to get to London if you happen to be there or want to be there. Venues coming soon. And where's my next slide coming?
Alan, you've got that Danielle 9th of May, is that correct?
Whoa, no, that's not correct. Good shout. That is me not updating the date. So that is the 19th of July.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, Paul.
No worries.
The other 2 dates are good, 19th of July, which is a Wednesday, I think. Good shout. Usual things to note for those of you who are regulars. This slide happens every time. So to repeat, we are live on YouTube. The link to YouTube is on the event page, and that exact same link is also the recording. So if anybody wants to watch the recording, it's that link on the event page. That is what that is. We always send a follow-up email. The follow-up email only goes to people who RSVP to this meetup. So no RSVP, no email, and that email will have whatever we want to share, upcoming events, anything worth mentioning off the back of this, and a link to the recording and any other information about what we may need to confirm in the next few days or so. And that is, thank you, Tara, recording links in the chat window. That is me. So if I stop my share and Paul, if you're ready to rock and roll, I'll hand the baton over to you.
Thank you very much. So I just need to share this. Okay, Alan, Tara, can you see that okay?
Yep,
Yep.
we can see it.
Cool. All right. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for attending this evening, because I appreciate a lot of you actually in Europe and one for the sounds of it in the States. So thanks ever so much for that. I'm Paul Martin. Got a lot to cover today. Not too happy, I guess, with just the title. Using XMLA with Power BI for end user reporting sounds very techy, but hopefully we can get through that very early and then talk about really the real purpose of this session, which is how do you unlock Power BI data for Excel reporting. Yeah, I think we've almost come full circle. One of the gentlemen was talking earlier on about taking data in Power Query and then getting it into Power BI. But if you look at all the stuff where Microsoft are going now, it's quite clear that Power BI, in particular Power BI Premium, will be the data warehouse of choice for what we're conventionally used with in the past with SQL Server Analysis Services cubes. And what we really need now on top of that is obviously the dashboarding engine, which is Power BI, but also some Excel basic reporting on top of that. And that's what we're trying to talk about today. How do we unlock that information so you've got seamless dashboards and seamless end user reporting in Excel? So in terms of the stuff we're going to cover, and I'm going to move through this very quickly. I don't even really want to do this first bit, but I'm conscious that it is, everyone's talking about XMLA. You look at all the GynaCube videos, Radicad, everyone's going, XMLA, why should you care? Well, just really revisit some of that for some of you who might not be familiar with it. And why does it matter to you as an end user? I don't want you to think of this as some techie thing that might be really useful for some. This is really, really big stuff. And talk about really how we can harness it for Excel reporting and visualization. Like everything, the Microsoft world is obviously changing so much at the moment, and there are some performance considerations you need to be aware of, which we've been looking from the practical side of that, and I'll be covering that as we go through. I will do an introduction to myself and the company in a minute in terms of the technology, but that's the main part of the intro. Then we'll have a look at this thing called EIB ReportStudio. I'm Paul Martin. I work for Excel in Business, abbreviated to EIB. And EIB ReportStudio is going to be, I think, the world's first free XMLA reporting adding for Power BI. So this will allow you to connect to your Power BI data sets and produce first-class reporting in Excel. Why is it needed? You could say, well, Microsoft's got everything out there at the moment. There's Power BI and you can connect pivot tables these days. And actually pivot tables is a good example of connecting through the XMLA interface. So what does it deliver that's beyond that? And why should you care? And why should you hopefully want to use the product? And then obviously most of this evening will be in a demonstration. And then we'll talk a bit about how would you get your copy and any questions. If you've got any burning questions, raise them in the chat and Alan and Taya will be looking at it. And if they're really important to stop me, then obviously we'll stop and carry on. If not, we'll do them at the end. Okay, a little bit about myself and the company, Excel in Business. We've worked on about over 600 MI projects over the last 25 years, and out of those, at least I would say 450 are on the Microsoft platform. So that would have started out originally on things like SQL Server 7, can you believe, with OLAP services, which was the first Microsoft Cube engine, right the way through to the latest Power BI Premium and Premium per user applications. So we've had 4 Excel products during that time, and whilst I'm not trying to say we know everything, because obviously we don't, I think those 600 projects hopefully has allowed us to leverage some of the practical issues that people face when they're trying to deliver Excel reporting on top of lots of data, whether that being a data warehouse or Power BI. So in terms of the actual products we have 2 parts of a product set that we call EIB Analytics. First one is the EIB App Studio, which is a back-end product for building Microsoft BI applications in a very visual way. And the one we're really going to focus on tonight, which is EIB ReportStudio, which is an XMLA reporting add-in that fits in Excel and talks directly to Power BI. This is a bit on our App Studio product, really just showing how we process data and move it into the Microsoft environment. But so we're not really covering that tonight. We can cover that as a separate thing. The ERB Excel reporting and the ReportStudio is really saying, how can we build reports that Excel users are used to and leverage all the data in Power BI? And I think there's a big difference there. I'm going to come on to this in a bit more detail. But Excel users don't naturally fit within the BI products of nice grids and static grids, because we're used to that lovely anarchy that we have in Excel, where we can put absolutely anything everywhere to deliver the reports that we're trying to deliver for our board and colleagues. So if I look through this and sort of about us, the final thing on us is we kind of live and breathe, as you may have guessed, Excel and Power BI applications. We tend to work mainly at the enterprise level. So a lot of the time we are working with quite large data volumes. But I think, you've all been seeing how much Microsoft have been talking about the integration and the importance of Excel and Power BI working hand in hand. From our perspective, we have over 100 customers using these technologies, and not one of them only uses Power BI or only uses Excel. Because obviously, like most things, there are real horses for courses, and some things are better done in Power BI, some things are better done in Excel. So the important thing is how do you leverage the data and make sure the data is only stored once, or your calculations are only stored once. But whether you want to do visualization in Power BI or nice formatted reporting or ad hoc analysis in Excel, you should be able to obviously do both in harmony without having to constantly redevelop. Okay, so XMLA, what the hell does it stand for? One of the things that I wanted to tell Alan, if you can help me a second, I've got this irritating Zoom thing at the top of my screen. Do you know how I get rid of it? Because I will need to get rid of it for the ribbons later on. Sorry?
Alan, I think that you might be on mute at the moment.
I am, yeah. Well, not now, but yeah.
So you should be able to just click on it and maybe drag it down or just hide it somewhere.
Yeah.
That particular bar, so that it's not interfering with what you see. But it's something that we don't see on our side.
Okay, yeah, I just will need it obviously when I'm looking at the ribbons a little bit later on. Okay, fine. I'll try and get away with it. Okay, so XMLA, what does it actually mean? So it came originally from the whole thing of XML, which has been around for ages. And really all that's really talking about is how can people get different applications talking to each other without each one of them having to know in detail what the other one is doing. So it's an easy way of communicating between a front end and a back end. And I guess the whole point of XMLA is really an extension to that into analytical software, front end and back ends, and saying, okay, we should be able to plug our add-in into Power BI without us knowing the ins and outs of Power BI, and Power BI should be able to consume our add-in without knowing the ins and outs of our software. That's kind of it in a nutshell. So if I look at a bit of information that's kindly provided by Radicad, you'll see the importance and also the maturity of XMLA. XMLA has been spoken about a lot in the last 12 months, but it's been around ages. And I think Reza Rad is a good article here where he says, I'm sure if you've loaded Power BI desktop, you've noticed that it seems to take an eternity when you're comparing it with an Office 365 app. I can load Excel, Word, PowerPoint in a nanosecond, but when I load Power BI desktop, it's kind of whirring and clunking away even on a fast machine. Well, the reason why it's doing that is there's kind of two halves to it. There's the front end, which is the Power BI desktop, but in the back end, what it's actually loading is Microsoft SQL Server Analysis Services Engine. And you can see that in Reza Rad's task manager here, that this is being loaded. So even when we tend to think of these SQL Server environments only being available normally on a server and our corporate servers, actually what you're doing is actually installing an instance of that behind the scenes. Now, why would you care and why is that important? Because the SQL Server Analysis Services is the original Microsoft Cube engine, if you like. And the XMLA interface makes that analysis services open. So it's a trusted engine, it's a proven engine, and it's a mature engine. It's been there, for 20 odd years. So the fact that we have analysis services within Power BI means without XMLA, Power BI is pretty much a closed app. It's pretty much like, if you like, a Click, or to a degree, a Tableau, in terms of you can't get into their data sets. But what we're allowing with XMLA is we're saying, well, if we want to do Excel reporting, if we have other specialized tools that do certain things, maybe things like project management, budgeting, all those sort of things, they can use that interface to talk to your Power BI data and Power BI structures. But I stress, as an end user, you shouldn't really see any of this. So don't anyone on the call think, oh my God, have I got to learn something new? No, you haven't. It's just the plumbing behind the scenes that connects you to the engine. So XMLA into Power BI is already used by Microsoft. Microsoft, when you do pivot table on top of Power BI, or whether you go from the Power BI service and say, I want to analyze this data in Excel, either way of that, what's actually happening is Microsoft is kicking off a session in Excel and using XMLA to talk to the Power BI engine. Now, for third parties like ourselves, it allows us to obviously enable our ReportStudio add-in to talk to Power BI. And even perhaps third parties you wouldn't expect, and I'll come on to some of the relevance of this, people like Tableau to even be able to front Power BI. And you might be thinking, why on earth would anyone want to do that? But bear with me on that one as we go through. So, okay, so why has there not been all this fuss before? Because, you know, Power BI has been around donkey's ages now. XMLA has been around 20 years. So why is it only the last 12 months that there's been a lot more articles and a lot more interest in this? Well, to go back to fundamental basics, if you go into Excel or you go into our product and you want to connect to a Microsoft data warehouse or Cube, the first thing that it's going to ask you for is a server name. It's going, okay, where's this data? What server is this data on? Now, that's been a bit of a problem, really, with Power BI Pro days, because if you look at Power BI professional workspaces, there is no server. So you have no idea what that server is called, and hence you can't talk to it. That is why the XMLA interface is only available at premium per user or premium capacity, because there's no reference to it. You can't go into a pivot table and say, I know where that pro server is. You have no idea. But if we look at premium per user, you'll see that if I go into the workspace settings here, then at the bottom here, there is a workspace connection here. And that effectively is the name of our server. So Microsoft gives you that. You've got this little click button here that then would give you the copy that URL. And if you provide that as a server, then you will then actually get access to the Power BI model. Now, if you're thinking, well, what happens then if I've got loads of pro models? And I quite like the idea of this, but how the hell do I move those pro models out of pro into premium per user? It is absolutely trivial, but there's a big but. The trivial point is you just change it. You just right click and say, I want to make this a premium per user workspace. Microsoft says it's going to bill you loads of money, and it'll then stick it into a Power BI premium per user workspace. It is as simple as that. But of course, what you've got to think about is if you do put your model into a premium per user workspace, then only premium per user licenses can connect to it. So there's a bit of thought there. But the massive breakthrough, I think, in the last 12 months is if we look at UK pricing, then Power BI Premium was like something like £3,700 a month. Well, that's a no-no for most of our customers, and I suspect a lot of people on the call. But Power BI Premium per user is only about 15 quid a user per month. So it's actually really unlocked this potential, which is why I guess there's been so much interest in it over the last 12 months. So in terms of analyzing the basics, you know, this isn't too sexy, this first part of the demo, but just to bring everyone up on the same page in terms of how we get access to it. I'm just going to go over onto my remote desktop here. Can everyone see a blank Excel workbook? Or so should I say, Taya and Alan, can you see a blank Excel workbook? Taya, can you see that?
We can see it, Paul, yes.
Cool. All right, so if we were going to connect to a Power BI workspace and model, there are several ways in we can do that. If you're using the Microsoft stack, you just go into data. And when you do get data, there's actually two ways of doing this now. There's kind of the more modern way that Microsoft have introduced recently, where you can say, I want to actually get the data from Power BI. And this will now list all the Power BI data sets here on the right hand side, and you can kind of key in some search words for it, and it will obviously then allow you to pick the various models that you wish. If I just look at, it will then go away and look through these models, and when you see the model that you like, and this will only obviously show you premium per user workspaces, it will not show you pro for the reasons we discussed. You just click insert pivot table, and then that will actually then allow you to build your pivot table. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to teach you how to build pivot tables. I'm sure you know how to do that, but this is now effectively, if you're used to a pivot table, you just drag obviously the data in there. Now, the other way of doing that, the more old way, and this is again, if you want to find out how would I find out what the name of my server is? If I go back into Power BI here, as I said to you, the only time you'll get the name of the server for the workspace is when you're on a Power BI premium per user workspace. So I guess the first question is, if you've got lots of workspaces, how do you know? Well, the reason, I don't know if you can see this very clearly, but there's these sort of, I don't know what you'd call them in a way, like diamond icons here. And anyone that's a diamond icon is actually a Power BI premium per user workspace instead of a pro. So I know if I click on one of these, I will get a server address. So if I click on this in the service and ask for workspace settings, you'll see if I click premium here now, I've got all the same sort of gubbins as you'd have with Power BI Pro. But when I go down, the massive difference and the bit that allows us to connect is, you can see now at the bottom, that is effectively the server address that you would actually need. So I've shown you how you can connect in Excel. You can also connect in Excel using exactly this way. So if I go back in and go back to data and say get data now, but do it the traditional way, this is what you used to have to do, and you still can do. You actually go from database, from analysis services, and now the server, which in the past would have always been an on-premise server name, you can just paste in the name of the Power BI workspace, give it your Office 365 authenticated username. This is where I worked for a company with a small name. It always takes a bit longer to key in. And then when you click on next, it will now connect in exactly the same way. So it's using that address to get to the model. It's saying, I found the model. And if I click on finish, I'm exactly in the same position as I was before. And I can now drag in, obviously, these values in there. Now that also works with third-party products. I'll be showing you ours, obviously, a lot more a bit later on. So if I can then come back to, what does XMLA open up? It does also allow you to do things like connect through other BI clients. So if I take, in this example, Tableau, and I'll say, bear with me on this. This is not as silly as it necessarily sounds. So I'm going to load up Tableau now. And Tableau doesn't know anything about Power BI per se, but it does know Microsoft Analysis Services, SQL Server Analysis Services. So again, in the same way, I paste in my URL from my Power BI workspace. Again, in the same way, I give it my Office 365 credentials. And I'm in. It then allows me to pick the model. I can go to the worksheet. And you can see now, here is my Power BI model in Tableau. So in the same way, I can just obviously look at, I can drag stuff in here. I can drag in brokers in this insurance model into here. I can have a look at my premium measures perhaps and drag underwriting profit into wherever. So why that's not going in. Second one. There you go. Sorry about that. So I'm drag that in, not XML on Tableau, and put brokers now perhaps in the columns. So now I'm looking at a Power BI data set in Tableau. Now you might be thinking, well, is this just some sort of intellectual joke here? Because why on earth would you want to do that? But funny enough, we were actually dealing with a financial institution recently who had loads and loads of Tableau. We wanted to start moving them to Power BI, but it's really, really hard when you've got an investment to say, well, why don't you chuck out all your Tableau stuff and start re-engineering it in Power BI? Given the current economic climate, no one's keen on doing that. So you can kind of break it down in chunks and say, well, then why don't you actually start putting the back end in, because you know this is the way it's going with Power BI's dominance in the marketplace. Use what you've got at the moment, and then we'll gradually then build in the front end. And that's what they actually did initially. And now they've actually started to go more completely Power BI. So it has this openness where you can leverage even the benefits of Power BI as a data warehouse, which is where Microsoft is going, and saying, you know what, if we have to front it with Tableau for the time being, does it matter? If you're fronting it with Excel add-ins, does it matter? As long as the users obviously get their final applications. Okay, hope that makes sense. And that was just an intro to the basics in terms of how do we connect to a Power BI model in that way. So remember, you go to the workspace. If it's a premium workspace, you'll have the workspace connection. That will be the server you will use in any client tool to allow you to connect through into the Power BI from that tool. Okay, so if you look at XML add-ins to date, though, I can't say as an end user it's really excited me, because the XML add-ins originally was, okay, you can connect SQL Server Management Studio to Power BI. You can document your models in Power BI. You can connect pivot tables, which is a bit more interested to Power BI, but nothing really for an end user. And that, I guess, is until today. And so we are announcing really the world's first free XMLA reporting add-in. And this will allow you to have very powerful reporting analytics in Excel, leveraging your Power BI models. So all the data's in one place, all the calculations in one place. The only proviso here is that obviously you need to have premium or premium per user data sets. It won't work on Pro. And I'm sorry to keep reiterating that. I just don't want either of you to be surprised. So where are we going with our product on this? What are we trying to do? If you look at the complete reporting landscape, I guess this is pretty much how we would see dashboards through to reporting. So if you look at MI as a generic thing, and obviously you can add things in here like AI all around this, but fundamentally you start at the top with dashboards. At the bottom, you tend to have very formalized reports, and somewhere in between, your users want to go off-road and do some ad hoc analysis. So if we look at that, what does that mean to our product, and how does the Microsoft stack up? We kind of see Power BI as really fitting in there. Absolutely brilliant at dashboards, probably not great at formal reporting, and all right at ad hoc analysis, but not really totally great. And if we look at pivot tables, well, that does provide some ad hoc analysis, but again, not great at formal reporting. So there are certainly gaps all over the place. And obviously we're going to be slightly biased here, but I guess if we look at our ReportStudio add-in in Excel, we're not certainly going to try and do any of the dashboarding that Power BI can do, because it's brilliant at that, and we can't compete or want to compete with an Excel product. But what we do really well is this middle and lower end, where if you want to do ad hoc analysis really quickly without a lot of knowledge and formalized reporting, you can do so by leveraging all your Power BI data. So I guess you can kind of see where I'm going with this. If you add ReportStudio to Power BI, we think we genuinely, for the first time, cover the whole spectrum of what you're actually trying to achieve. Okay, so why do Excel users not naturally work well with pivot tables and Power BI? It's an interesting one, because there are loads of people using pivot tables, but there's a lot more end users doing MI without pivot tables than there are with people using pivot tables. And it's the same bit with the Power BI stuff. You can dump stuff from Power BI as a matrix, or you can have a live query, but why is that not floating people's boats completely? Well, I think the reason is, if we look at what Excel delivers, this is a typical Excel report, and it's not a nice, neat little grid on its own. Yes, there are grids in here. You can see there's a grid here. But a lot of the time, the thing we love about Excel is we can do stuff as we want. If I want to make that formula over there, the sum of one product plus another that doesn't actually naturally group together in Power BI for whatever reason, but my boss has asked me to group those in a report, I can just do it. I can't do it easily in these other environments. So I think the big thing is, and this was a quote from a company called BI Smart, who are a business intelligence software company. And it was basically Excel allows more operations with data than Power BI. In other words, it has more diversified functionality, which can obviously just be used. I can put anything anywhere and it will just work. Now, of course, there are problems with that, and we'll come on to that. But the fundamental issue, I believe, is Excel users produce MI from free-form reports more than grids. And that's where there isn't necessarily a natural fit on why I should be excited as an Excel user in the past. But I guess if we look at, what is that? The trouble is with grids and free-form, it's normally a compromise, isn't it? With grids, the nice thing is you get the drill down, as you've seen in Power BI, as you see in pivot tables. I can nicely drill down my hierarchy. I can slice and dice and drag stuff across. Can't do that in freeform mode. Can't do that in normal Excel. And I can even drill through to the underlying transactions. But I guess on the other side, in freeform mode, I can do any calculations. My boss says he wants me to add that to that. I don't have to say, well, I'm really, really sorry, but that's not in my Power BI model. I can't do that. I'm not going to get very far with that. And I can also provide any groupings that are perhaps not included in the data. Again, if there are multiple cost centers, multiple regions, multiple products, there's always going to be a point where someone goes, you know what, we're thinking going forward about grouping those products together. Could you just do a report and see if we did, what would be the impact over the last 5 years? You can't really do that in Power BI. Of course you can change the model, but I didn't ask you to do that. I just said, we're thinking of doing it. I want to do that now. I don't necessarily want to change that for the whole corporate world. I just want to do it. And the other thing you get with freeform reports, which I guess is the thing we most love about Excel, I can format anything I want. If you want a blue cell with bold on it, I can give it to you. If you want the cell underneath to be totally different with an inserted line or column, I can give it to you. So I think the thing that's attractive about our offering here is I believe for the first time we are offering the best of both worlds. You can do all the stuff you'd expect, but you can also lay information out in a free format mode. So I guess unlike pivot tables, and I'm certainly not trying to slag pivot tables off because pivot tables is a very functional piece of software, very useful piece of software. But what we can do here is our add-in is native. So the cells in Excel, even when you're doing drill down, are just normal cells in Excel. They're not a grid that's kind of superimposed in the middle of Excel. That's the fundamental difference. Okay, so if I look at the 4 pillars of our product, the first thing we have is a gallery where we can store reports, because the other thing I find also a bit strange about some of the Microsoft briefings here is they're talking about going, well, you go into Power BI and you do analyze in Excel and you build yourself a pivot table. That's cool. So we've now in a big organization, imagine a Coca-Cola, Astra or whatever, there are now hundreds of these spreadsheets. Where are they all going to go? I've built a model, you've built a model, someone else has built a model. Where are we going to stick them? Now, of course, you can say, well, big companies will have OneDrive and SharePoint, and maybe that's the case. But a lot of the time that technology is not implemented. A lot of the time in smaller companies, they don't have anywhere to put that. So you don't really want all these Excel spreadsheets still back on people's PCs. So what we allow you to do is to store those spreadsheets securely. Now, to you, when you're storing them away, it looks like a Windows Explorer folder structure as you'd expect, but actually behind the scenes, it is a SQL Server database. So it can be backed up, it can be secured, all those good things that IT people tend to like. But they store all your reports and dashboards that you develop based on Excel and ReportStudio. The other thing we have, which is really powerful, is this thing we call train of thought analysis. One of the things I've worked, as I said, in this space for 30 years, and one of the things that's constantly frustrated me is when people say, self-service reporting, and they say, oh, it's really easy. I've got a screen here. What happens if I wanted to change it? Well, it's simple. I bring up the layout panel and I drag this to that, and I drag this to this, and I drag it to that, and there you go. Simple. No, it's not simple. because particularly now with Power BI, a lot of the models will have hundreds of dimensions. So it's not a case of being simple from a product point of view. If I give you as an end user and say, the good news is you've got 120 dimensions here now you can drag across, I'm not helping you one bit. You have no chance of producing the analysis you want. But it doesn't remove the need for saying, well, what happens though, if I am looking at this product-based report, I wonder how that product was doing by region or by sales rep or whatever. And it's stuff that I'm just thinking of now on the fly. We think we now found a way where you can actually do that without any knowledge. So end users can go off-road, but without having to know the product. Then we have the whole application packaging. If I'm going to give you loads of Excel spreadsheets, most of the users in our customer organizations, I can think of one insurance customer that probably has about 50, 60 reports that are running their business in ReportStudio and Excel. Us saying, well, the good news is you can go to a folder and do open file, open report one. That's not going to cut it with their users. So as part of our product, we have application packaging that allows you then to auto-generate menus in Excel that are A, user-friendly, and B, can easily be maintained and changed and shared, and then can actually package all the Excel content that you want to give to your end users. And last but not least is, in a way, quite boring stuff, really, but really, really useful boring stuff. We tend to think, oh, we're in an online world here, but we're not completely. A lot of our users have to produce report packs every month. And one of our customers, a charity organization, sends those report packs out to 80 different users. So you can imagine, don't matter what technology you're using, what they used to do is change cost center 1 to cost center 2, produce the report, save it as a static copy in Excel, email it to the user, repeat that 80 times. Oh my God, we've now had a problem with the data. We've got to reload the data, do it another 80 times. What we have in our distribution engine is the ability to package content and then actually send that out to people. So you could say, I want to produce this distribution where I produce a sales report, profit and loss report for all my cost centers, for all my departments, for all my companies. And I want that just to be ran and output as static content. Now, of course, the other thing that gives you is point in time recording, which one of our customers uses that a hell of a lot, where you're saying, the Power BI models don't stop. Imagine if I was doing like sales commission reporting. So I'm paying you on the sales you made, but then 2 months later, after I've given you your commission statement, the sales have been actually posted back. There's been some modifications and they've changed history. If we now run a live report and we try and reconcile back to that date, well, it's not going to reconcile anymore, is it? So by taking this approach with the report packs, you can actually say, not only do I want to use it as a distribution mechanism, but I also want to use it as a point in time recording. So if I need to go back and look at how were the values in May, in June, then I can do so with ease. Okay, if we look at one last techie bit, saying, well, that's all very well, but if we look at the way third-party add-ins like Excel and Tableau and that talk to Power BI, we've already mentioned they're using XMLA, which is the standard they're talking over, but they also talk in a language which is multi-dimensional expressions. Now, don't worry about that. Again, as a user, you don't need to learn it. You won't even see it, but you need to be aware of it. So the way third-party products, and I include Microsoft Excel pivot tables there, talk to Power BI over XMLA is through this thing called MDX, which was the original language for querying cubes based on the Microsoft stack. And the only reason I'm boring you with this is you need to be aware what that means, because effectively when we issue multidimensional expression or MDX queries into Power BI, what we're really doing is we're getting the data per query. So if you do something large, we're getting all that data from the Power BI engine and then throwing it back to the client tool for it to handle. Now, it might seem subtle, but that's very different from the way Power BI works internally. So if you look at the way Power BI works, then Power BI uses a more modern, if you like, language for querying data warehouses called data analysis expression, or DAX, as I'm sure a lot of you have heard. But the way it gets the data is slightly different. It actually looks at each visual and focuses the query based on the visual. So it doesn't get everything it needs, it gets what it needs to render each visual on a page at a time. So what that means is by getting the information per visual rather than globally, it does mean it tends to do that a lot more efficiently. So DAX is without doubt quicker than MDX. So you do need to be aware of that. Obviously, when you're building your reports, you're not ever going to get exactly the same time. So we look at a sort of contrast between the two there. You know, MDX is used by Microsoft with pivot tables, and when you do analyze in Excel, that effectively again uses MDX across the XMLA to render the data. It's used by third parties like Tableau and us for querying Power BI. And it's really, really fast and scalable with SQL Server analysis services, really fast. But it's not as fast as DAX when you're putting Power BI premium per user models. And you'll probably see that when we do some of the demonstrations. But the good news is it tends to kind of catch up on itself. So in other words, when you initially load a report, that tends to be slower than the refreshes. The refreshes then are quite good once it's done that, because effectively it is getting all the things it needs up front, rather than just saying, well, I've got one visual there that's only asking for this at the moment, so that's all I'm going to actually go and get. So it's just worth knowing that when you compare the two. Okay, so that's all I really wanted to talk to you about. Now I really want to show you that if you get ReportStudio, as I said, you can have a free copy of this. It's likely to be out in July for public consumption. So I'll give you details at the end of this session on how you can get your copy. And the people on this session will be certainly the ones who get it first. Then this is what you can actually expect. So I'm going to go over now back to my remote server. Alan and Taya, just at this point, as we go on to the demos, is there any questions that have come up at all that I need to address?
I think that there's been just one from Mike on formal reporting versus dashboard. What's the difference?
Yeah, very, very good question. Formalized reporting versus dashboards. So dashboards, I mean, again, you can obviously, dashboards don't have to be purely graphical. They can have obviously reports in them, but they tend to be focused on graphical information and I guess showing people where they're winning or losing at a summary level through visualization. That's fundamentally it. If we look at something like formalized reporting, if you think of things like, I don't know, profit and loss and balance sheet statements in a finance company, they have to be just so. If you're dealing with finance teams, you know, they need to be in a certain way, they need to look a certain way, they need to have certain calculations in them, and they tend to be much more report driven. And they also tend to have very precise formatting, because that's what the end users really wish. So I think there is a difference there. And I think you'll see that if you start doing long reports, then they are dealt with a lot better in Excel than they are in Power BI. You know, in Power BI, what you end up doing is having a scrolling table, and that really isn't good, because you know, or you may not know, if you then export anything from Power BI, for those of you who use Power BI a lot, you'll know there are export options for export to PDF or export to web page format. That will not get you anything beyond the scroll bar. So in other words, if you've got a 100-line report and only 10 are being shown in Power BI, that is all you will get when you actually save as a PDF. So very, very different uses. And I think you'll see that hopefully when we come on to the demonstration. So what we're going to do here is when we ship the product to you, we're not going to just install it and you get to a blank Excel workbook and go, what do I do next? We are going to try and package the demo content that you're seeing here in your version, so you can see how we do things, you can see what is possible. So when you load Excel, you'll notice that it loads, obviously, and then it will connect to the EIB add-in. And you'll see that rather than getting a vanilla Excel interface here, you now get this nicely packaged application. It is native Excel. You can even see at the top, it says Excel there. So I've not taken over Excel in any way, but you can see if I'm a user and I'm just consuming reports, it's a hell of a lot easier than file opening. So we have information obviously on support, you know, even which version do I need? So obviously the version you'll be getting is the free version. There is also going to be a premium version, which what is out at the moment, which is what our customers are using at the moment. And if you want to see obviously what the difference is on there, I can actually send you this workbook at the moment is not public consumption, but if you want to see in advance what you get, then there is a full-blown feature comparison as you would expect. There's also, you know, how do you get help, which of course, as you'd expect. So again, we'll obviously have stuff in here like a support page, which already exists on the site. You can obviously log any tickets if you find any issues or you're not sure how to do anything. So I guess the next thing then is, okay, I'm now moving around here. What sort of things do people typically do with the product that perhaps isn't quite as standard in using something like Power BI? And I think the thing here is that a lot of the time with Excel users, they really do want pixel perfect reports. So here you can actually take things, you know, a lot of people's reticence, and I don't know whether some of you have found this, when you move people who really use Excel to Power BI, is they almost want to recreate everything that they've got in Excel because it looks like it. Our board likes the format. We don't want it to look any different. We don't want it to feel any different. And of course, that's not really possible. You've got to use Power BI at what it's good at, which is the visualization. But of course, if you can then connect back to that data set, then you can still do this using our product and actually keeping that sort of standard. So if I pick this report here, this is a report I got off the internet. So this is not one of our reports. This is one of those classic reports on the internet where you kind of go in, oh, you know, I give you this report, you go and key in or overtype stuff in here, it refreshes the dashboard, isn't it cool? And it's very cool, really nice report. But of course, it's not multidimensional. This is basically saying if you've got a two-dimensional Excel spreadsheet and you want to make it look pretty and put some graphs on it, then you can. So what I did is I thought, well, the good news is the way our product works, it's very easy to map the data coming from Power BI directly onto that report. So this is exactly the same report now using our product. But this time what it's actually doing, it's actually connecting to our underlying cube or Power BI model. And it looks no different. At this level, it looks exactly the same. But the fundamental difference now is when I click on company, I can now go in here and change that because I've got the full-blown Power BI model behind it or full-blown cube behind it, depending what technology you're using. And I can instantly now refresh that data. And you can go even further than that. The one that I took, I think, was ridiculous. I won't show you the original because I said it is the original. But you know, some people take reporting to the ridiculous lengths, and this was an article that I saw on the internet. So again, it was a flat two-dimensional report and dashboard here. But of course, here what I can do is by clicking on this, I'm actually querying the Power BI engine and so forth, and going around and bringing up the different things in the database. Now, I mentioned earlier on was, yeah, that's all very well, but you know, there was a question that came up is, you know, what's the difference? You could argue in those two instances, or certainly the last one, I'd probably be better off doing that in Power BI and make a lot neater job of it. But if we look at then what do people do with reports, then if I take this P&L trend report, this is where Excel, and particularly Excel with our product, is much better than Power BI. When you're trying to produce large formalized reports, Excel is a better option here because I can lay the report out how I want. I don't just want a grid of data. I want to have blank lines wherever I want. I want to, when I drill down, so you can see here that if I was in a pivot table or a Power BI model, when I drill down, everything's going to be all kind of together. But here, when I double click on UK sales, it remembers that as I drill down, I'm still preserving all the blank lines in between the major metrics that are in the model. So this is how I'd expect Excel to work. You know, I want my Excel report to look like an Excel report, but I also want the benefits of being able to drill down on this. And you can see that when I go on here, everything is naturally an Excel cell. I know this does not make a lot of sense, but just to prove that to you, if I do that equals that times 2, you can see these are just Excel cells. So there's no grid imposed. This is a native Excel model that we're actually using here. Okay, so if I now go back and look at I just shut this menu and go back to the previous menu. I'm now going to have a look at, if I go under professional, so we've got two fundamental variants of the product, the professional one, which is free, and the enterprise one, which is chargeable. If I go into the professional apps here, what I've done is I've got some models that we've built in Power BI that I've connected to, and I've also got some models that Microsoft provide, and I'll show you the link to that. Microsoft now, I don't know whether any of you have used it, but they actually provide some example data sets now as Power BI models. So if you're new to Power BI, you can download those data sets. They've got some visualizations in them. And what I did was I just published each one to a Power BI premium per user workspace, and then use our Excel add-in to connect to it. So if I look at now some sort of things you can do, the first one I'm going to look at is this insurance report. And this, again, is where I think Excel, particularly with our ReportStudio add-in, scores over things like Power BI. You'll see that initially it can take a little while just to render the report. It's normally quite quick once it opens up. So this is now going across the ether, connecting to my Power BI data set in the Microsoft service, and now rendering a report. Now you'll see that when I double click on any of these allow me to change any of these dimensions that are at the top there. And you can see here that I've got brokers, if you like, in my rows, and I've got my different years of performance across the top. So at this level, if I look at this table, for want of a better word here, you could say, well, I could do that with the pivot table. I could do that with the Power BI grid. And of course you can. But the thing that we give you is interaction. And this is what I expect as an end user in Excel, and also the ability to do calculations on the fly. This contribution calculation doesn't exist anywhere. This is saying, based on what I select as an Excel user, what is the contribution of the brokers that are actually in the report? But I can change it interactively. What I think, if I'm really honest, is quite poor in Power BI is the ability to change things interactively. If I want to go here and say, well, I'm not interested in my top 5 brokers, I'm interested in my top 10 brokers, I just key that into an Excel cell there, and it regenerates the query from Power BI data. And if I say, well, I'm interested in my top 10 brokers, but actually I'm only interested in those top 10 if they're actually generating more than 8 million's worth of revenue for me, then I can just key in 8 million there, and you'll see now it's come back. And not only now is only returning the brokers that is giving me more than 8 million, but it's also now recalculating the contribution. So those 8 brokers, top 10 brokers, the ones that actually give me more than 8 million, actually represent 20.65% of the contribution of my business. Now, from customers that use our product, this is not an uncommon thing they want to do and need to do to see how they're actually performing in their business. You can't easily, I mean, I'm always frightened to say you can never do this because there's always enough fixes out there, but you can't easily do and naturally do stuff like this in Power BI.
Paul, quick question is coming from Maria. Does this support number cell format in Excel, including colors? Yes and no.
Yes, we do. So what I'll explain by that is you'll see that certain formats, this is where, again, there is a bit of disparity between Power BI and Excel. Where Power BI will pass through the number format it has in its model to Excel. It does that every time, but there's a big but here. The but is certain formats that Power BI uses are not supported by Excel. So if you've used a certain currency symbol or whatever in Power BI that's not perhaps supported in Excel, then what Excel will do is it will say, I'll try and apply that style, but I don't know what that style is. So I'll just go back to a number, which sounds like what you might be experiencing. What we do is we allow you in the Power BI model to actually put there's a description field in the measures. If you put stuff in there, we will actually bring back any Excel formula, any Excel formatting style and render it correctly in the Excel interface. So it's not as slick as I like, because I would rather Microsoft just provide us all of it. But that is the problem. You know, things like percentages and stuff are fine, but other certain formatting, you can't say all of Excel's formatting is supported in Power BI. It isn't. So unfortunately, there will be certain things that are passed back, but we can get around that. we can actually say, okay, in your Power BI model, then when you're defining your measures, I can't remember the name of the field we use, but behind the scenes is a description field somewhere. And we look for that and say, if there's something in that, then use that as the Excel. When it comes through to Excel, render that, and that will give you colors or anything that's supported in Excel. Okay, hope that makes sense. So that's one example. The next thing I'm going to do is actually show you where the product is very good at bringing back structures very, very flexibly for reporting. So this one is now just going to go into a financial example here. So this again is a Power BI premium per user data set at the back of it. And you'll see fairly simple report here. I've got my chart of accounts here, or summary chart of accounts here, and I've got different years of account here, and I've got things that I want to change here. So how do we interact with it? For the first time you're seeing now, how do you interact with the product from a designer's point of view, not end user's point of view, designer's point of view. So we have a dedicated Power BI ribbon here. And if you bring up the report layout panel, then this, I guess, is analogous to a pivot table, where you're saying, what do you want in the rows? What do you want in the columns? And also, what do you want in the criteria? Now, a big practical benefit that I keep forgetting until I use pivot tables is we don't treat measures any different from any other dimension. So if you put measures in the slice here, in the criteria, you get a full list of measures and you can change any report for any measure. You can't do that easily in Power BI or pivot tables, to be honest, without a lot of jiggery pokery. So we don't treat measures any different to any other dimension in our product. But the other thing you'll see is that the way I select data is a lot more flexible and a lot more data driven than if you were doing stuff with, say, something like a pivot table. So in other words, at the moment, if I go into what have I got in my rows, you can see that I haven't got selections here. You know, like when you go into a pivot table, you'd perhaps say, I can see all the things that are checked, and that's what I get back. I can see sales checked, et cetera, et cetera. Here I haven't. I've just got a rule that says, give me members directly below the all member. So if I look at the all member there, you'll see that's what I'm getting back. I'm getting the members directly below sales through to financial overheads. And the beauty of ReportStudio here is you can make this rules-based, or you can literally pick individual. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's the benefit of a rule? Well, the fundamental benefit of a rule is if in your Power BI model, you added 9 extra things in here next week, they would automatically come through into the report without you doing anything, because the rule that's being evaluated is give me the members automatically underneath all. And this is really, really flexible. You know, if I just get rid of that and just say, I'll delete that. So now I've not got enough selections to draw the report because I've got effectively nothing now in my rows. I can do various things here. I could actually say, you know what I want is I want you to bring back everything. I want to bring back all members below, members directly below. Let me just say all members below. That might take a little while, but let's just do that. And what that's going to do is that is going to automatically give me every single level in the hierarchy. So that one rule, I'm going to generate a report, and that report will be evaluated every time we render this, assuming I save it away, of course. The next time I open that report, it will go through and evaluate that structure. So this will give me a complete P&L structure with all its detail at every single level in the model. And you can see there's my level 1 broken down into cost of sales, broken down into the next level of down, and you can see we're indenting that just from doing that one rule. You can see all the different things that we're doing here. And of course, if I double click on here as well, then obviously what I'll get now is all of that for 2 different years. And the other thing I can do, which I really like as an Excel user, I can insert rows and columns wherever I want. I didn't want 216 to run into 217. I wanted actually a gap in between so I can see the breakdown of my years. You can do that. You can insert rows, columns wherever you like. You can also take a view here where you think, you know what, I don't want 216 being repeated. That looks a bit clunky there. So actually what I want you to do is remove any duplicate column headers, and I've got now a nice report here. Now remember, we're in author mode here. I'm not expecting the end users to do this. I'm just preparing a report. Once I save it, all the end user has to do is run it and double click and drill up and drill down accordingly. Now, if I go back into the panel here, the other thing that's quite nice is, whereas at the moment I'm using rules to get this, you might say, well, I don't want to use rules because I only want specific things in my report. And I don't want them to be reevaluated. I don't care how my Power BI model changes. I only want sales, trading, expenses, and costs or something. So again, if I delete this now, I'm going to go another way now. I'm going to actually go, you know what? All I want is sales. All I want is overheads. And I'll have financial overheads in there. And actually, I'll tell you what I won't. I'll take overheads out. I don't want overheads in there. Now, another thing that we find when people are doing precise formatting is that sometimes you might want something in overheads that's not the parent. It's just one of the children. But again, the problem I think you have in products like pivot tables, if I picked rent and rates here in a pivot table, I would get overheads and rent and rates. I don't want that. I don't want all my overheads. I only want rent and rates, and I only want power. I only want these. So you'll see here as I add them in here. So I've added that twice. Don't really need to do that. That it's actually just adding what I need. So I can have a report here on multiple different levels. I don't have to always have parent, child, parent, child, parent, child. And again, that works much better for me as an Excel user, because a lot of the time we're getting unnecessary baggage put in here, which we don't really want because it's just the way it works. Now, by default, we indent the levels when they're further down, but you might say in this report, well, I don't really want that because yes, it's nice you've been allowed me to pick these lower levels, but to me, this is just a report now where these all should be on the same level. So you can go in there at any point in time and say, don't indent the rows. And now I've produced a report as you'd expect. Now, the other thing we might want to do with that is we might also want to have the formatting move with the rows. So I might want to do things in here like saying, you know what, with these two, for whatever reason, I want to insert a row before each one of those. I might actually, just to keep it even, I think I'll insert one there as well. And I might then actually say, well, I want to perhaps format some of this. That one is a special row, for example. So I want to go in, and we use styles here. So you can pick any style that you want and say, right, I want to apply an Excel style. And you can have as many styles as you like. But the fundamental difference is I'm now starting to go round and starting to format this report as I would do as an Excel user. The difference, of course, is even though this just looks like a flat Excel report, if I double click on sales now, you'll see not only does that drill down, but it also keeps the formatting against rent and rates, and also keeps a blank line between rent and rates and the above. So I'm hoping you're starting to see now that where this is a much more natural paradigm to an Excel user, because I can lay the report out in the way I want, but I also still get drilled down. I'm not constrained. It's not an or. Okay, so what I want to do now is actually start something from scratch, because if you're cynical like me, you kind of go, yeah, this is all very well. What he's shown me so far is just gone into a report that already existed. And then he's hacked around with it a little bit. Yeah, whoopee. So now I'm going to say, well, let's go to a blank.
Mark, sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
Just before we start like a new thing, a couple of questions, or a few questions have been popping up in the chat. So there's a question about, sorry if you're planning on covering this later, but about performance compared to classic Excel XMLA. Access if you've got huge data sets.
If you've got huge data sets, the performance in our product will be better because we use windowed queries. So in other words, if you take something that would, and we've got this, I guess, from our experience on analysis services, and analysis services, you can easily generate a query that's more than 1 million rows, and then what do you expect to happen? Because obviously Excel will only support 1 million rows, and it doesn't really support 1 million rows because it will croak before you have a chance to populate 1 million rows. So what do? So we tend to use windowed queries that says, okay, if you're going to do something like that, and I will show this, then we'll perhaps window that query. So if you really do want to scroll through millions of rows of data, you can, but you probably didn't mean you really wanted to do that. So you can actually set the queries up and optimize it. That said, we are still going through XMLA engine with MDX. So we're never going to be as fast on the query side as native Power BI. And we'll be slower when we're opening the reports. But once you've actually got into the reports, sometimes the refresh is as good, if not better, depending on the sort of things you're actually doing. But certainly you shouldn't have a problem in terms of, well, you've seen some of the stuff I've done where I've even been interacting with the data and actually getting it to do more processing on the query, and it's okay. But I will cover that in a bit further on.
Sure. But yeah, and there's also a question about subtotals and totals.
Yep. You can apply subtotals, and you can also apply calculations into your rows and columns. In fact, I'll show you that now, actually. So it's not just a case of saying I've got a subtotal. You could actually, do a particular total that doesn't exist anywhere. You've just decided you want to actually put it into the actual query itself. Okay. So I'll show you hopefully what I mean by that. Let me just do so. So I'm going to connect now to one of our Power BI PPU models. So this is now going to go into our insurance demo workspace. I've only got one model in there. It's quite a big model. So what this will do, obviously the first time round, it's going to connect in there and really not do much. It's going to get all the metadata that it needs and then actually display the data. Now, one of the things I mentioned was that we don't treat measures any different, which I think is really nice because this makes building reports so much easier and so much quicker. You can see here, I've got measures in the criteria here, and I can just automatically enable. Really, really nice. No different, not anything special, exactly the same as any other dimension. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of the defaults here. I don't want all measures in rows. I don't really want that in columns. So obviously now I've got nothing in my rows and columns. So the software said there's not enough selections you're giving me to draw the report. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a date hierarchy for the policy start date in there. I'm going to put an as at date hierarchy in the criteria. I'm going to pick something like on premiums. And you can see my point here about if you give end users the ability to pick stuff like this, they're never going to get their heads around it. This is a fairly simple model, and there's hundreds of dimensions. This is based on one of our existing customers, obviously not their data. And I think I'll put scheme name in the columns. And what else shall I have? Let's put broker. Broker's a big dimension, so that will probably take a little while to render. But if I put broker in the rows, so I'm getting my underwriting profit here. Let me just change that back to revenue. I know the magnitude of that. Go to my written premium, and then I drill on my scheme, and then I'll drill on my broker. And the broker will take the first time round. It will take a little while to render. It's going to go now and get a list of all the brokers by scheme for gross written premium. So no real complexity query-wise at the moment, but there you go. I've now got all my brokers by my scheme. Now there's several things you might want to do now. One of the things is, and this again comes back to I think the natural things that Excel does that perhaps you don't get with pivot tables and even Power BI. Is now my boss has said, we're thinking about merging commercial vehicles with fleet. Can you give me a total for that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on here now and insert a column here before motorcycle. And then I'm going to actually put a formula in there. So I'm going to say this can be anything what I want. So I'm going to call it com vehicle and fleet. Now what we can do here is we can actually put in the Excel formula that we want. And what we do, all we have to do is give any Excel formula in the first row, and it will dynamically expand and contract based on the actual query itself. So in this case, commercial vehicle and fleet at the first row would actually be C10 plus D10. So I would just literally type that in as a formula, and you'll see now that it's now rendered that into the actual thing. So this now appears like part of the query, even though it isn't. And of course, if I now change gross written premium to underwriting profit, that will obviously now re-render that and reapply the calculations. That makes sense? So we can do that all over the place. And this is where it is really, really powerful. But the other thing we can do, if I now just delete that column, obviously at any point in time, I can delete these and it will then obviously remove it from the query. The other thing I might want to start doing is the stuff I showed you earlier on about being able to sort the data interactively, or I might want to be able to do some ad hoc grouping of some of these brokers and produce a chart from it. So in other words, my boss has just asked me that we might be merging Black Tweed Insurance, Broker Bright and Comica together. What does that look like? And what would that generate as a product mix or broker mix here? And this is where I'm not going to explain this in detail, but this is where we have this thing called smart copy paste. And what I can do here now, I can't remember what ones I said now. I'll just take any three I can remember anyway. I'm going to take that one and say, I want to smart copy paste that. And I want to put that into a new workbook. So I'm going to go down to here. I want to put that data in there. And I want to copy that. Bang. Now, at the moment, you're thinking, wow, I could do that with Excel formula, but bear with me on that. So I've got Black Tweed Insurance there, and I'm just, for the sake of it, I'm going to actually merge it with Camulus, Catbright, and Comica. So at this stage, I'm going to take all three of those and say that's what I want. And I want to put those here. So I want to put those into B10, starting in B10. And I want to copy those over as well. But my boss said he wanted a total of this. So I'm now going to put totals, and that I'm going to use good old Excel because I know how to do that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I quite like at the moment the formatting of that. So I'm going to, sorry, Alan, I know you're going to know all the shortcuts for this, but I don't. So you'll have to bear with me. I'm just using box standard out, and there you go. So I've got that. Now I want to actually do perhaps go back and pick up the headers in the same way as well. So I'm going to go to that, take those, and I'm going to put those there. Now, all of these are interactive. You know, these are not static values. They will refresh, but I'll come on to that. But the next thing I want to do actually is perhaps take all that and now insert a chart, because this is what I like. You know, I'm in Excel at the end of the day. I want to actually produce a chart of this data. I don't know, let's choose that one. It's a bit unusual. Okay, and I've now produced a chart. Let me get rid of that. So you can see, and I don't know, I won't put a title on the chart. Everyone knows how to put a title on the chart, but you can kind of start to see this is much more how people who use Excel prepare MI. But whereas they normally would dump this perhaps from a static copy of Power BI, and then you've got all the issues of static data and when was it last refreshed, and then this is coming directly from the Power BI model. As the Power BI model gets refreshed, this gets refreshed. But I know what you're thinking. I'm saying to you now, if I go back to sheet 1 and double click on one of these, it will automatically refresh sheet 4, and it will. But you're going to go, no, I don't want to do that. I might give this sheet to the end user. I want to do that here. Hence, again, where smart copy paste comes into it. I now highlight these guys and I go, right, I want you to smart copy those. And I want you to put them over here. And I now want you to copy those in. And now I want to close that. So we have to apologize here. I'm a bit anal on formatting and stuff. So I'm going to take that off. Yeah, that looks a bit better to me. So now I've got my core query in here that's looking at underwriting profit. I've got a breakdown by broker and by scheme. And here I've got this grouping that I was asked to produce. But if I now double click on gross underwriting profit and change that from underwriting profit to premium, how cool is that? Yes, I've got to actually make that, maybe make that a bit wider. And there you go. So I've got a fully interactive report now on some analysis I never, ever had at the beginning. This doesn't exist in Power BI, but all the data does. And you'll notice if I go back to sheet 1, we're already on gross written premium because it keeps them automatically in sync. Same the other way around. If I change gross written premium here and move that back to net underwriting profit, which is one we've not had, that's now rendered the net underwriting profit. I'm now looking at the net underwriting profit broken down. In my mind, I'm happy with this because this is how I work and how I've spent 20 years working with Excel. I can move stuff around. I can make new things, but I'm not altering the fundamental premise that this stuff really is what we believe is for Black Tweed insurance. It's not something I've taken a copy of. It's not something that's static. It's not something that won't be refreshed. It's coming directly from my Power BI warehouse here. And I can go further. I'm now going to go, yeah, that's all very well, but I want to do some ad hoc analysis. When I give this to my end user, I know what my end user's like. They're going to start saying, well, how do you, if I picked article broke in there, how could I analyze that by X, Y, Z? So one of the other things we can do, I mentioned as one of the pillars, was this ability to do train of thought. So this is me setting it up. You'll see how easy it is for a user to use it, but this is me setting it up. And in fact, I don't even need to set it up to some degree, but I'm going to do here. I'm going to go and say, I want to configure train of thought. So this is where I think about, if this is my business, what are the sort of questions my end users are going to want to delve into? What are the business dimensions that are important to them that they might say, well, how's that broken down by that? Or how's it broken down by whatever? So I'm going to actually go into premiums here. And I've got all these dimensions coming from my Power BI model. And I might say, you know what, I know what they're like, because it's motor insurance. They might want to be able to analyze that by car brand. So I'm going to set this up to be available for them to do a train of thought analysis on it. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to say, I want to bring back all the car brands and actually say, yeah, I want to allow them to pick that on the fly. So you can see at this point, nothing's happening. Don't worry about that. We're just configuring it. Binder is the different type of super scheme that an insurance company has. Yep, I can see them asking about that. That's quite important to them. So again, I want them to be able to see that on a train of thought. And I want to be able to pick that out. Yeah, I can get that. And then I can look at all these other ones. I might then go back to, you know, insurance tends to be quite geospatial as well. So I might say, yeah, I know what they're going to be like. They're going to actually want to know what county this business was as well. So I'm going to actually then allow them to pick the county as well. So I now click on OK. I click on OK. Nothing happens. So I save this report away, say to my end user now, this is your report. You've got a nice little dashboard here with the ad hoc grouping that you want, and you've now got your main report on here. You can change any of these things interactively, but this guy suddenly goes, well, article broking wasn't what I was expecting. I wonder how that's broken down by county. Now, rather than me trying to bring up the report layout panel like you do with pivot tables or here, of course I can do it and say, oh, good news is it's so simple. You can just expand all of these and drag the ones you're interested in. Yeah, like hell, that's never going to happen. I can actually say you're interested in something, all you have to know is right click. So I go into article broke in there, right click down to the bottom here, train of thought. It says, how do you want to analyze article broking? Because that was the one I clicked on. I'll say, you know what? I want that broken down by binder name. It will now build a brand new report for me on the fly. Never knew it once was going to do that. And it now breaks this down by binder name. I've now got my binder name across the top broken down by broker. But I'm not done there. That's cool. But I now want to actually further expand my train of thought. And I want to actually now pick on the crimson binder, insurance binder, and go, all right, I want to break that down further. And I want to break that down by county. I click on that, it will build another brand new report for me. Now it's going to actually then allow me to see by county how I'm doing across all these different schemes. So you can see that what I'm fundamentally allowing you to do, I'm allowing you to produce a formalized Excel reporting environment, but also allowing the end user to go completely off-road to then go and give a breakdown now without having to know the product. So the only thing I need the end user to tell me or know is what are the key dimensions that they're likely to analyze by. And of course, I can add them at any time if I miss any. You saw how hard it was. It's not hard. And if I save this report away now, this will become yet another ReportStudio report. I can change any of these. So, and I can change obviously the results here. It's not like it's now cast in stone. I did it on article broking, but you could say, actually, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do an article broken, but I like this analysis. So now when I double click on this, this will now allow me to change that to a different broker. All of these are fully interactive reports. So if I change that now to Broker Bright, it'll go away and get another set of data. So I hope you can see that from nothing, a blank sheet of paper, I've leveraged the investment in my Power BI model and gone around and got all that information and allow me to produce totals, allow me to put columns in, allow me to put blank lines in, allow me to format the data, and allow me to do that train of thought with it as well. Okay, conscious of time, and there really is a lot more. The other thing I wanted to show you was, I guess that's all very well. But what happens then when we're dealing with offline users, i.e. people we have to send content to? How do we cope with that? So if I go back into here, one of the features we have in the product is a thing called report distribution. And what this allows us to do, it allows us to build a report as I've just done. So you get a report to the point where you think, yeah, that's what I want to do. But maybe I want to roll this report out to someone. Maybe I want to actually send this to someone, but I want to send them static content. I don't want to go through and save 15 insurance companies and then save them all static reports and then send them. I want the system to go away and do that for me. So if I take this example here, this is connecting to one of the Microsoft Power BI models. So up until 3 days ago, I can honestly say I'd never even seen this model. So what I did was I took what Microsoft gave me, and I put it into, I downloaded the PBIX file they gave me. I published that to a Power BI Premium per user workspace. So I then had exactly the dashboards that they gave me. And then what I did was I connected it to our product through the connection interface and then built this report and thought, yeah, that's actually what I want to give my end users. But the problem I've got is they're not online. So they don't have access to Power BI. They don't have access to ReportStudio. But I want to send them perhaps multiple manufacturers data. I want to send them sales and profit or whatever. So what I can do here under our distribution ribbon here, I can say I can set up multiple distributions. I've just set up one, for example, here called sales and marketing. And what I can go through, I can say, I want the system to build me a static report for the things I ask it. So what I can do is I can set up some criteria first of all and says, what are you trying to produce this report for? So you can see I've already added, I want you to produce this report for sales and total units. That's what I want you to produce it for. But I also want you to produce it by manufacturer. And I've asked you to produce it for all manufacturers, for Abbas, for Natura and Pirium. So if you do the simple maths there, if you've got 4 manufacturers and 2 measures, what I'm asking the system to do is build me 8 static reports that I can send out. But I don't want to just do that because I've already said early on, I don't like it when people just get vanilla Excel workbooks. I want to package it as an application. So when I look at, when I output this, I actually want to output it as an Excel file. I can output it actually as a web archive or a PDF, but I want it to do as an Excel file. But also what I can do is say, I want to also put a little contents page on there. I've designed this little contents page. This is just an Excel workbook, nothing to do with EIB. I've just designed this and said, when you run these reports, I want to put our company logo in there. I want to put in certain cells the title of the report, when it was last updated, and then I want you to build an index. I don't just want 8 reports. I want you to build an index here, real time, for those 8 reports, so my end users can easily navigate it. Yeah. So now all I have to do is, if I go to the distribution and hit run, you'll see if I run that, the values won't change because we don't really want to suffer any performance by keep refreshing them. But can you see behind the scenes, it's saying preparing report 3. What that's doing is it's looping around the Power BI data, and based on what I asked it to produce, it's actually going in now and producing a report for each one. Then it's taking my content sheet, and then it's actually saying, okay, I've now built a workbook for you that you can now give to an end user. In other words, they don't need Power BI. They don't need ReportStudio. They will just get a bog standard Excel workbook that they can open and review. So if I shut that down, you'll now see that what I've done next to that, if I go into here, this is a static Excel workbook. And you can see that it's used my content sheet. I asked it to timestamp it when it was run and put it in this cell, which it's done. This should be the GMT time for today's date. But not only has it done that, it's built an index for me at the bottom. So actually, if I want to look at sales for Abbas, I just click on that, and it'll take me to sales for Abbas. So this is a static report. Now, one of our customers is a charity, and they have to do a pack like this to 80 cost center managers. Can you imagine the amount of effort? And I'm sorry, but Power BI or pivot tables doesn't help them at all. Because what are you going to do? They haven't got access to the live data. How are you going to produce this pack for 80 different people? But this is what they actually get. They get very nicely packaged consumption and nicely packaged reports that they can then vary. So you'll see if I go through each one, here's sales for all manufacturers, here's units for all manufacturers, here's sales for Abbas, etc., etc. You get the idea. So this is another key thing. And of course, if I save these reports and then I run it for the same time next month, I've at least got this data preserved in my organization. If suddenly next month it's changed, some reason we posted some historic data, I'm not into an argument of, I'm sure when we ran the reports originally, it said 1.5 million there. Well, it doesn't now, it says 1.3. No, because I can go back to the point of time when that data was available and see what the data actually was at the time. So you can see, I think when I mentioned the 4 pillars about what we do, 4 pillars is the gallery to store all this data and reports, and to centrally control it, because I can then put permissions on this. So we can even get to a scenario where you and I have access to the same data in the Power BI model, but I can run a report that you can't, and you can run 5 reports that I can't, because we can increase the security also at report level. Now, I haven't really scratched the surface, as you can imagine, in a 2-hour thing here. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Just gonna load that back up. But just a couple of things to leave you on. If I look at the enterprise space on this, so this would require a paid for license, but we can do obviously reports on pretty much any of the Microsoft data sources. We even have the same functionality looking in SQL databases. And rather than show you each one of these, I'm going to cut through the chase here and just pick one that's got all. And what this is going to do now, this is going to produce one report where I'm getting some data from Power BI. I'm getting some data from Analysis Services Multidimensional. I'm getting some data from Analysis Services Tabular. And I'm getting some data from a SQL engine. And I'm going to combine them all together in one report, and all of them are going to be interactive. And some of them are going to have user input. And this is my whole thing about Excel. Excel users are not static. We don't just run queries and go, oh, that's the answer. We want to change it. If I want to change this to my top 5 things, then I want to be able to do that. So I've got, that is Power BI. That is a multi-dimensional SQL Server Analysis Services cube, fully interactive. I can change the periods. I can change what I want here. This is a SQL database down here. You might not realize it's totally different because it looks pretty much the same as the rest. But I can go in here, double click on product. and I can now pick a particular product, and it will refresh the data accordingly for that product. And this is a in-memory SQL Server tabular cube or an Azure Analysis Services tabular cube, all in one report. But the point is, all of this is native. There are no grids here. These are all Excel cells, but I'm protecting the real estate, and I'm allowing you to combine any data you want and format any data you want in the way you want as an Excel user. Okay, I've got some slides. I'm conscious what Alan said to me. I had a hell of a lot more to show you than this, but I'm conscious of your time, giving up your time, and it's now getting late for particularly those people in Europe. But I'm just going to finish on a couple of slides, but just in case there's something here that I could show you if there are any questions. Any questions that have come up, Alan, since the last ones?
No, I don't believe so.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into finishing. So in finishing off mode, obviously where we're going to try and take the free version of this product is, you know, I love the thing from a techie point of view. I love the thing that the tabular editor guys did with their product in terms of making people, you know, get it out there and getting people using it and so forth, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to produce a free version that could be used by Power BI users. So we obviously want to tap in to that. And obviously the nice thing about that is it's a new product, but it's not new at all because it's already being used in over 100 customers. I hope you can see some of the maturity of it in terms of what you've seen from the demo. There are going to be charges for the enterprise and enterprise per user. Not worried about going through those now if anyone wants to talk about those or what the differences are. But fundamentally, the free version, which is what we've been talking about tonight, will allow you to do all those things you've seen on Power BI Premium and PPU datasets. Nothing I've shown you tonight, apart from the exception of the last screen where we were combining sources where you would need one or the others, was enterprise specific. So I think in terms of the 5 reasons really why you should dip your toe in the water, hopefully you've seen pretty good on the management reporting side. I think, and our customers think more importantly, the train of thought analysis is a big breakthrough. It's the first time, it's the thing that's frustrated me for years. How can we deliver train of thought analysis without people having to know the product? Because I just don't buy this report designer rubbish. Distribution, in some ways you might say pretty boring. After all this interactive stuff, we then talk about producing static stuff. But it's a reality of life. We have to do this in certain circumstances. And it is a pain for a lot of organizations to do this. We hopefully make that really simple. And then interacting with the data. You know, as I said, if I'm an Excel user, I'm sorry, I don't buy this thing that I get, you know, top products all nicely color-coded, but I can't then interact with what I think should be top. What's the criteria for that? Is it over a certain amount? Is it between certain amounts? Is it top 10% that I want to change to top 20%? I don't like this. Well, I'm sorry, you can't do that. And last but not least, I think when you look at the enterprise space, where people have lots of Excel workbooks based on the Power BI content, we have a way to not only centrally manage that, but also a way where you can package that in applications. So instead of saying, yeah, you do file open network drive Z colon, and then you've got 50 reports to choose from, you can deliver it as an Excel application rather than a series of reports. So I guess you know, there's a partner model there for any of you who might be partners or potential partners that you may be interested in talking to us about. And then I guess the key thing finally is, well, how do you get your hands on one? We're still doing some work, not on the actual product, but more on the content to make sure that the content that I've shown you today is nicely packaged. So when you download it, you can even use all that content. But certainly if you do want an early bird version, we will be making that available in July. There are 3 ways of getting it. You can either email me directly, you can email our support line, or you can call me directly. That's my UK cell number. So I'll leave that up for a little while. But that's the end of the session. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it informative. And I also hope, beyond anything else, that the really boring topic of XMLA analysis is actually really about unleashing Excel on your Power BI models. That's really the way I look at it from an end user. Okay, thank you ever so much for your time. I don't know if there's any
Thank you, Paul.
Awesome. Yeah, there's no other questions in here at the moment. I've popped your LinkedIn link in the chat window for people to access you that way, and obviously you've got your details on screen. I'll do is to keep it brief because I've actually got somewhere to be. But if anybody does have any questions, then feel free. You know, we always open the floor at the end of a session. So if you wanted to ask Paul anything, feel free to unmute yourself and do so. There's a few.
I can kind of hear something, but I can't hear it, if that makes sense. I can hear very background. I don't know if someone's trying to ask a question.
It might be me, I think. It might be Taylor's back. You still out there. You can't see the chat window, can you, Paul?
Actually, I probably can. I suppose I can if I put it up there, actually. Sorry about that.
There's just a few people saying thank you, so it might be nice.
Oh, okay. Well, more actually. Thank you guys for actually attending. And actually, I do apologise, Alan and Taya, because having seen the stuff that they actually have to organise, a big thank you for making this run smoothly and organising it in the first place. That is not an easy or pleasant task to do, but thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
All right, well, if that's it, then well, thank you for your time. Hopefully you've not taken too much of your evening. And any questions, obviously just ping them to this email or to my mobile or to my LinkedIn.
Yeah, indeed. Well, cheers, Paul. Thanks again.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.